So I'm working on my message for tonight. I am preaching at our midweek service in Lorraine. And I'm excited because I'm going to be preaching about something that is really important to me, which is integrity. And I'm going to be using like 1 Samuel, showing how David became who he was and how he served under Saul. And then eventually, obviously, Saul went crazy and wanted to kill him. And so I'm kind of going to draw this picture for everybody of like, hey, look, David had this opportunity to get back at Saul over and over and over again, but he didn't allow these opportunities or the people around him or what looked good by the world standards to cause him to take things into his own hands. He kept his integrity of who he was, and God honored him. So it's really cool. It's going to be a good message, but you know, when you preach at our Lorraine campus, it it can be a lot because, first of all, I haven't been preaching for that long. It's only been since February of 2023. So it's less than a year right now that I've even been doing this. And, you know, when you start anything new, a job, a career, any of that kind of stuff, it can come with challenges. You know what I mean? It can really come with challenges and insecurities and all that good stuff. And even preaching in our Lorraine campus is a big deal for me. Like, it's my grandparents. You know, my grandparents were Christian legends, like in ministry, and even the lineage that they come from and the mantle that they carried was just, again, like legendary. And then you add in my parents, who are just amazing pastors and amazing ministers, and then you add in even like my big cousin, who is an amazing minister and pastor who just moved, and coming behind them, and you add in all these amazing elders that sit in our congregation as well, and it's like, oh man, I don't know if I have like you know, a word, or I don't know if I have a message that is worthy of the legacy of the house. You know what I mean? And I think that maybe that can be sounding like a negative thing, but honestly, I think that it is very reverent. You know what I mean? I have a really deep reverence and respect for what has been done before me, and I have very deep reverence and respect for that platform. So I don't care if it's Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Tuesday morning, whatever it is. Like, anytime I step on that platform, specifically in that building at Church on the North Coast in Lorraine, it means a lot because it carries the weight of that legacy. So I'm gonna kind of get into a little bit of my process. It's pretty different for each message. Like I said, I've only been doing this for less than a year now, like weekly. So I usually will start with just more of like a broad, like long list of just like, you know, themes and topics and stories, and maybe I'll just be reading through, like specifically for 1 Samuel, I was reading through and I was like, man, this is an amazing story of just David and Saul, and like, what can I pull from this? What can I cut from this? What can I add to, you know, this narrative that would provide clarity for people? And what is the Lord trying to speak? So when I do that, I kind of get into this process of like, okay, Jesus, what are you saying through this? What are you saying through this text? Where are you trying to lead us? What are you trying to teach us today that happened all these years ago? So with this one specifically, I was able to really just pull out that theme of integrity. And from there, it goes to like writing out a million different just ideas and ways to present the theme, and breaking down the text and giving historical context, giving spiritual context. And from there, I'll condense. So like, it'll start out as like this super long, like page after page after page on my iPad, but slowly over time, just spending time in God's presence, spending time just reading the word again, reading the text again, and listening to the Holy Spirit. Doing all these things together, He allows me to cut and make edits and cut things that shouldn't be there, or add things that He wants to say. So really, I think that when I talk about like my sermon creation process, it's mostly just listening to the Holy Spirit and reading His word and saying, hey God, like, what are you saying through this text? Holy Spirit, guide me. Tell me where I shouldn't be adding things. Tell me where this is my idea and not yours. You lead the way, I'll follow, not the other way around. So that's really my process. But when you're writing these messages, especially for a church like ours, like we are very multicultural, we're very multi-generational, and you have to understand like these sermons and these messages, there's definitely a pressure to connect with a lot of different people. There's people that are, like I said, elders. There's amazing pastors that are going to be in the room. There's people that have never heard a thing about the Bible that are going to be in the room. There's people that are biblical scholars in the room, spiritual warriors, prayer warriors, you name it, ministry leaders. Like, we have all of that in our congregation. And so when you talk about presenting a message in front of them, it's like, oh man, how am I going to give them something that is presentable? How am I going to make something that connects with all these different groups, right? So I think when you talk about like worries and things that kind of bring stress to this, it's like, okay, how am I going to make something that is going to connect with all of these different groups of people? How am I going to make something that's going to really be, worthwhile for all these groups of people? And it's a challenge. It's not easy. It's not easy bringing everybody along with you. You don't want to just go in there and be like, oh, here's all this deep, theology, and here's all these really untangible, like spiritual things that nobody can really understand. And or even on the other side of that, here's these really basic concepts where elder who's been a Christian for 50 plus years, you're just going to sit here and be like, wow, this is like kids' church. So it's not easy. That's definitely one of the biggest challenges, is kind of creating something that is able to be grabbed onto by a lot of different groups of people. And then for me, I think personally, the one that really, really is like the biggest challenge for me, I would have to say, is like perception. So perception for me is really difficult, because I think that personally, maybe it's just a lot of insecurity, but I also know that understanding that there's so many different groups in the room, and that there are so many just like spiritual leaders and warriors in the faith, like it makes me nervous. It makes me nervous of like, okay, well, how am I going to be perceived? Is my outfit going to be perceived as kiddish? Like I'm a very young pastor. I'm about to be 29 years old, so I'm really young. Is it going to be received as like, man, this isn't somebody who takes this seriously? Is my haircut going to be perceived the wrong way? Is my lack of a haircut going to be perceived the wrong way? Are my colors going to be perceived properly? So when I go into these rooms and I'm like, man, I have to get up there on that stage, I really do have a hard time sometimes getting ready, because it's like, man, how am I going to be thought of? How am I going to be perceived? How is my outfit going to be perceived? Or, whatever it may be. I sit there and think about it a lot, and it really does bother me, because I don't want to distract from what God's trying to do. You know what I mean? Like, and even with like previous lifestyles and like things that I used to be into, like I was a sneakerhead, like, is that going to be distracting? If I wear sneakers that I really, really like up on stage, is that going to be perceived as like, oh, he's trying to flex or something like that? Or is, I'm 29 with no wife and kids, and I'm supposed to be celebrating like 15 years of marriage and 8 kids in the Christian world. Is that going to be perceived as like, oh, he shouldn't be preaching, or he shouldn't be giving us this word? So there's a lot of things that go into the perception piece that give me like a little bit of anxiety, not gonna lie. A little bit of anxiety, a little bit of worry, and I'm just like, oh crap, like what these people finna think about me? I know they're not trying to hear what I got to say. I know they're not trying to see me up here in these whatever Jordans or Yeezy, whatever it may be. They're gonna be up here thinking I'm some kind of clown, whatever. And those things are all the time. No matter where I'm preaching, no matter what I'm dealing with, like those are one of like the main thoughts that I have. But again, like I know deep in my heart, and I know that in my life, God has showed up over and over and over again. And he somehow, every single time, just kind of puts his hand on my shoulder and he's like, look, man, like, you are my son. You've been called to do this. I gave you the interest that you have. I gave you the taste. I gave you the style that you have. Those things are going to help you minister to these people. It's not going to distract. It's going to help you really further the message that you're trying to give and what you're trying to say to these people through my spirit, through my word. And he always puts his hand on my shoulder and he's like, listen, you go up there, you be you, and let me do the rest. Follow me. Be you and follow me and watch what I can do.
And saying, Lord, only you. Less of me, more of you. None of me, all of you. Take everything, God. I want to be wise before you. 1 Corinthians 3:18. If you're wise by the standards of this world, become foolish, so that you can become wise. The wisdom of this world is foolishness in God's eyes. Become fools by the standards of this world. Become wise by the standards of heaven. Maintain the integrity of who you've been called to be, church.